Hey everyone, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton here with our weekly update on social media. One of the most important weekly updates you'll hear, given the new information we have about gain-of-function research that we were funding in China. You won't believe the documents. I can't or I guess I could, but it would be difficult to overstate the importance of the new documents about the mutant viruses that we were funding the development of in Wuhan, China. Also, new developments in the Biden scandals that aren't going to be surprising, but they're still going to be shocking, and you're going to highlight the need for more criminal and other investigation. Plus, we've got a cover-up out of the Biden Justice Department about Biden abuse of President Trump I want to tell you about. First up are the developments out of Congress related to the criminal activity alleged by Hunter Biden and the entire Biden clan, including the President of the United States, Joe Biden. I've been calling him RICO Joe, the Racketeering Influence Corrupt Organizations law that is typically used to go after the mafia, I believe should be applied to Joe Biden, and for reasons that I think are pretty easy to see, given all the evidence on the Hunter Biden laptop, which is why the left had tried to suppress the Hunter Biden laptop successfully prior to Joe Biden being elected as an act of election interference. And since then, now there's new information that the alleged investigation of the Hunter Biden laptop, if indeed there is an investigation, has been squelched, suppressed by the Justice Department. We have here a letter signed by a lawyer for a whistleblower that was sent to the top officials or top members of the Senate and the House responsible for oversight of the IRS and the Justice Department, etc. And this is what the letter says. I represent a career IRS criminal supervisory special agent who has been overseeing the ongoing and sensitive investigation of a high-profile controversial subject since early 2020 and would like to make protected whistleblower disclosures to Congress. Despite serious risks of retaliation, my client is offering to provide you with information necessary to exercise your constitutional oversight function and wishes to make the disclosures in a nonpartisan manner to the leadership of the relevant committees on both sides of the political aisle. My client has already made legally protected disclosures internally at the IRS through counsel to the U.S. Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration and the Department of Justice Office of Inspector General. The protected disclosures, number one, contradict sworn testimony to Congress by a senior political appointee, involve failure to mitigate clear conflicts of interest in the ultimate disposition of the case, and detail examples of preferential treatment and politics improperly infecting decisions and protocols that would normally be followed by career law enforcement professionals in similar circumstances if the subject were not politically connected. Some of the protected disclosures contain information that is restricted by statute from unauthorized disclosure to protect taxpayer and tax return information. And so he goes on to say, my goal is to ensure that my client can properly share his lawfully protected disclosures with congressional committees. Thus, I respectfully request that your committees work with me to facilitate sharing this information with Congress legally and with the fully informed advice of counsel. With the appropriate legal protections and in the appropriate setting, I will be happy to meet with you and provide a more detailed proffer of the testimony my client could provide to Congress. Now, all the reporting is that this is about Hunter and Joe, and that there's been interference by the Justice Department in the investigation or prosecution of Hunter Biden. Now, when it comes to contradicting sworn testimony by Congress by a senior political appointee, evidently, according to reports, that's the Attorney General of the United States, Merrick Garland. So what is the status of this Hunter Biden investigation? Now, as I was discussing with you last week, the FBI at least was looking at Hunter beginning in 2018. We know separately they've had the Hunter Biden laptop since 2019. We also know that in 2020, Attorney General Barr, then who worked for Trump, believe it or not, suppressed and squelched any investigation of Hunter Biden. We also know since then that the FBI, there were FBI officials allegedly who are also trying to squelch the investigation of Hunter Biden and the laptop prior to the election. And since then, nothing's happened. Supposedly, there's a Delaware U.S. attorney, so up there in Delaware, Biden's home state, that was blessed by Merrick Garland with investigating this. Now it's been, let's say, 2018 to 2023. What is that, 5 years of investigation and nothing as it relates to Hunter Biden in terms of prosecution? And now we know, now we have further confirmation of what we suspect. The reason there's no investigation or criminal prosecution proceeding as it would in the ordinary course is because of political interference. It's Hunter Biden. And everyone knows, based on what's been available publicly through the Hunter Biden laptop and through Tony Bobulinski, who was a partner of Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, that you can't investigate or prosecute Hunter Biden without implicating Joe. So that's why they can't allow this to proceed. So they've got it up in Podunk, Delaware, right? So when you have an investigation being run out of Delaware, it means it doesn't have the resources that a regular, serious investigation would have. In fact, the requirements of the Justice Department regulations are a special counsel is required. Now, of course, they appointed it for Trump with Robert Mueller, but not for Joe Biden and Hunter Biden on this topic. No. That's not the way it's supposed to work. So that's kind of in-your-face evidence of corruption and suppression of a legitimate investigation into these issues. Now, what are the issues? Money laundering, acting as a foreign agent without disclosing it, bribery, extortion, tax violations, conspiracy. Who knows what else in terms of the misappropriation of federal funds and such, while Vice President Biden was vice president. And I suspect this corruption goes back prior to his role as vice president as a senator. He just didn't become corrupt when he was vice president, that's for sure. And so now we have an IRS whistleblower who's putting his career on the line. I would suggest he's putting his liberty on the line because the less response to those who blow the whistle on their friends, it's to try to prosecute and jail them. So he's risking everything to try to come forward under law to expose this government corruption that's protecting Joe and Hunter Biden. And now Judicial Watch obviously has its own separate FOIA investigations, but the IRS isn't going to tell us what they're doing. The Justice Department isn't going to tell us directly what they're doing. We can ask questions about it and gotten some indirect information. But this is the situation we're in. A top IRS official has suggested that senior levels of the Biden administration are obstructing justice, perjuring themselves before Congress to interfere with an investigation involving Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. Does it get any worse than that? Where's the impeachment of Joe Biden? That's what I want to know, given the information that we're seeing here and the other information that's just lying out there in plain sight. We had more information coming out this week about the extent of the monies coming in from overseas to fund Biden Inc., to fund the Biden crime family. It's not just Joe, it's not just Hunter, it's not just Joe's brothers. Evidently, it's a half a dozen Biden family members who were getting this money laundered from foreign sources, according to the members of Congress who reviewed some of the Treasury reports about it. So there's more than enough to have a special counsel do a criminal investigation of the Biden family. Frankly, the rules and regulations of the Justice Department require that. And there's more than enough to have an impeachment inquiry into Joe Biden over these issues. So we're going to see what happens. It's interesting, Biden was forced to respond to this, and he just did it by attacking those who were raising the questions and had no substantive response. The NBC News, for instance, had a report, I guess it was today or the other day, let's say just recently, that there were 4 criminal charges they were thinking of bringing against Hunter Biden. And they're all penny ante stuff, relatively speaking, given the scope of criminality that I've talked about. So they can't even do the minimal criminal indictments of Hunter Biden. And maybe you've noticed over the last few years, like every 6 months there's a story, oh, they're thinking about prosecuting Hunter. Every 6 months they're thinking about prosecuting Hunter. Who are they kidding? Who are they kidding? They're thinking about how not to prosecute Hunter. That's what's going on in the Biden Justice Department. I mean, we need the clean house at the Justice Department. We need the clean house at the FBI that enables all of this. I guess, the FBI is angry because they finished their investigation a year ago. Of course, the FBI also corrupted the investigation they supposedly finished a year ago. So all these deep state bureaucrats are pointing their fingers at each other over this corruption. And I tell you, we're facing a rule of law crisis in so many ways here. And I've talked about the targeting of Trump, and this further highlights why the targeting of Trump is as much about protecting Biden and distracting from what Biden has done as it is about punishing Trump for daring to oppose Biden or getting in the way of the deep state. Okay, well, we took a break to fix my chair. I was afraid I was going to break the chair. I know I've gained a little bit of weight, but not so much that I thought I'd be breaking chairs, but I think we just had to bang it a little bit. Now it's fixed. So next up is a related matter. We talked about the Biden corruption and how the left was desperate. So desperate that they were willing to rig an election in order to keep the American people from knowing the truth about Biden corruption. And of course, lying about and dissembling about its involvement in rigging the election. Well, we already know how the deep state, FBI, and other agencies laid the groundwork in causing Twitter and other media companies or big tech companies to suppress and censor the New York Post story, explosive New York Post story that exposed the international money laundering operation implicating Joe Biden directly, and the Hunter laptop story. And of course, that's one way to rig an election, which is to suppress negative content for a candidate you support, while similarly punishing and censoring a candidate you don't support. And that's what happened in 2020. That's a fact. And now we know that that censorship wasn't just the deep state doing what the deep state does, which is targeting Trump. It was also specifically at the behest of the Biden operation. And we have that as a result of an investigation by Jim Jordan and Mike Turner of the Intelligence Committee. Jim Jordan is chairman of the Committee on the Judiciary, and Mike Turner is chairman of the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. A major step up from people like Adam Schiff, I can tell you that. And they have a letter implicating the Biden campaign in this suppression of content about Joe Biden and abuse of authority by those 50 former, quote, intelligence officials who falsely suggested the Hunter Biden laptop operation was a Russia disinformation campaign. Again, providing further pretext for big tech and big media to suppress this on behalf of Joe Biden. And this corruption is something well worth going into detail. This letter detailed April 20th, 2023, signed by Congressman Jordan and Congressman Turner, was sent to Anthony Blinken, who was the Secretary of State for the Biden administration, Joe Biden. The letter reads, "The Committee on the Judiciary and the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence are conducting oversight of federal law enforcement intelligence matters within our respective jurisdictions. We are examining the origins of the infamous public statement signed by 51 former intelligence officials that falsely discredited a New York Post story regarding Hunter Biden's laptop as supposed Russian disinformation. As part of our oversight, we have learned that you played a role in the inception of this statement while serving as a Biden campaign advisor, and we therefore request your assistance with our oversight." On October 14, 2020, the New York Post published a report detailing how Hunter Biden used the position and influence of his father, now President Joe Biden, for personal gain with the apparent awareness of President Biden. The article reported on several emails found on a laptop belonging to Hunter Biden that he had abandoned in a Delaware computer shop. The contents of the emails cast doubt on President Biden's previous denials of speaking to his son about international business dealings. Within 5 days of the article, on October 19, 2020, 51 former intelligence officials released a public statement attempting to discredit the contents of the New York Post reporting about Hunter Biden, stating that the story has all the classic earmarks of a Russian intelligence operation. News publications immediately ran with the statement, with Politico publishing a story with the conclusive headline, "Hunter Biden's story is Russian disinformation," dozens of former officials say. Social media companies simultaneously restricted access to the Post story, including Twitter locking out the Post and then White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany's accounts for sharing a link to the article. During the final presidential debate on October 22nd, then Vice President Biden cited the public statement to rebut President Trump's criticism of the Biden family business dealings, saying, "Look, there are 50 former national intelligence folks who said that what this accusing me of is a Russian plan. They said this has all the characteristics. 4 or 5 former heads of the CIA, both parties say what he's saying is a bunch of garbage. Nobody believes it except him and his good friend Rudy Giuliani." That was my Biden imitation. That's probably pretty weak, but it's the best I could come up with on short notice. Subsequent reporting revealed that the New York Post story was not, as the public statement claimed, and Biden parroted, part of a Russian information operation. This revelation, nearly 2 years after the fact, however, was little consolation. The concealed efforts or concerted efforts to dismiss the serious allegations in the Post reporting and to suppress any discussion of the story played a substantial role in the 2020 election. The committee recently conducted a transcribed interview with Michael Morell, a former deputy director of the Central Intelligence Agency and one of the 51 signatories on the public statement. By the way, we've run into Morell before. He was one of those Obama officials. As I said here, he was a top CIA official under Obama who was involved in the Benghazi cover-up. Judicial Watch uncovered that, by the way. In his transcribed interview, Morell testified that on or around October 17th, 2020, you, Secretary Blinken, reached out to him to discuss the Hunter Biden laptop story. At the same time, you served as a senior advisor to the Biden campaign, Blinken. According to Morell, although your outreach was couched as simply gathering Morell's reaction to the story, it set in motion the events that led to the issuance of the false public statement. Morell testified, question to Morell, but prior to Secretary Blinken's call, you did not have any intent to write this statement. Answer, I did not. Okay, so his call triggered. Answer, yes, it did. It did, yes. That intent in you, yes, absolutely. That same day, you emailed Morell an article published in USA Today alleging that the FBI was examining whether the Hunter Biden laptop was part of a, quote, disinformation campaign, unquote. And that was the FBI dishonesty to try to help Joe Biden, stories like that. The very bottom of the email you sent to Morell included the signature block of Andrew Bates, the then director of rapid response to the Biden campaign, or for the Biden campaign. So Blinken was up to his neck in trying to suppress the Biden laptop story. Morell testified that his communication with you was one of the few communications he had with the Biden campaign, explaining that he also received a call from Steve Ricchetti, chairman of the Biden campaign, following the the October 22nd debate, to thank him for writing a statement. And this is what Morell said about that. After the debate, I think it was after the debate. In fact, I'm pretty sure it was. I got a phone call from Jeremy Bash, who I work with at Beacon and who is active politically. And Jeremy said, do you have a minute to talk to Steve Ricchetti? I said, of course. He was the head of the Biden campaign at the time, and Jeremy got him on the line, and Steve thanked me for putting the statement out, and that was the extent of the conversation. Morell also explained that the Biden campaign helped to strategize about the public release of the statement. Morell testified that he sent an email telling Nick Shapiro, former deputy chief of staff and senior advisor to the director of the CIA, John Brennan, that the Biden campaign wanted the statement to go to a particular reporter at the Washington Post first, and then he should send the statement to the campaign when he sent the letter to the reporter. Morell testified, however, he did not recall why he told Shapiro the campaign wanted the statement to go to this reporter first, and admitted that he may have spoken to the campaign on another occasion. Morell testified that one of his two goals in releasing the statement was to help then Vice President Biden in the debate and to assist him in winning the election. He testified, what was the intent of the statement? Well, there were two intents. One intent was to share our concern with the American people that the Russians were playing, that the Russians were playing on this issue, and that too, it was to help Vice President Biden. You wanted to help Vice President Biden? Why? Because I wanted them to win the election. You wanted him to win, that's why? Yes, sir. So it goes on and on. So what happened is that Jordan and Turner, because of Morell's testimony, want Blinken to turn over any records he has about this corruption. Why is Congress interested in this? Because frankly, they should be impeaching Biden, but specifically because you had all these folks with national security clearances working with the campaign to interfere in an election with a false statement that was designed specifically by their own admission to help Biden in a debate, and was created as a result specifically of a campaign request out of Joe Biden's operation. So, you know, it's just more confirmation of the corruption behind the 2020 election. I mean, I know there are all these debates about voter fraud and all of that, but when you want to look to see how, you know, elections get messed with, this is how it happens. And you're victimized because you're denied access to information that could change the outcome of the election, change your vote. You have a right to the information as an American citizen, and the government and, quote, former government officials and big tech companies working with the government and these former government officials and the dishonest media shouldn't interfere with your rights in that regard. Morally, ethically, legally, constitutionally. You pick. So this is another example why this corruption is so serious, because we have a man, a Secretary of State, who was willing to be dishonest about something that's very serious in terms of national security, the likelihood that the incoming president and then candidate for president was on the take from foreign leaders and had been compromised by his family's business dealings, and Biden knew about it all and was benefiting from it. And Blinken's still there. And do you think foreign leaders don't know about this and aren't calculating it when they make their decisions, both with Blinken and with respect to Joe Biden himself? I said it once and I'll say it again, it bears repeating. You can bet the leaders of China and Russia, both of whom have compromised Joe Biden through financial dealings and favors for him, certainly have calculated and incorporated their knowledge of Biden's corruption in their decision making, right? So if they're thinking whether should I invade Ukraine, they look to see, oh, well, Biden's on the take. He's on the take for me if you're Putin. So, you know, maybe I'll do it in a situation I otherwise wouldn't do if he wasn't similarly compromised or corrupt. Same thing with China. Are they being more aggressive, sending balloons into the United States? Recently, we had literally an alt government set up in New York City, a Chinese police station being used to target Chinese nationals here in the United States. Do you think they would have been as aggressive or would be as aggressive if they didn't understand Biden to be on the take, again, from them in this case? Of course. And now our Secretary of State similarly compromised. Our national security, our country's position in the world, has been compromised and corrupted by Joe Biden's corruption and the corruption of those around him, like Anthony Blinken. Messrs. Jordan and Turner of Congress and any other honest congressman and senator need to do what they can to address this corruption. And you can be sure that Judicial Watch will continue its FOIA work on this. We've exposed Hunter Biden's corruption. We've exposed Joe Biden's corruption on these issues with Russia and Ukraine. We have ongoing litigation on these issues, and more is coming because I'm glad Congress is doing this. And what I like about this letter that they sent out to Blinken and about what they've uncovered from Morell's testimony, it used to be the Republicans, when they were doing investigations like this, wouldn't release this material in a timely way. They'd sit on it. I mean, we know this has happened. We saw this in the past. And what I like about what Jordan Turner did here is that they found the information and they released it quickly. So that's good for the public interest. And do they need to be doing more? Of course, everyone needs to be doing more. But they are doing more than used to be done. So, I'm often critical of Congress, but when they do the right thing, we should tell them they're doing the right thing. And kudos to Jordan and Turner for being on the ball and getting this information out and exposing this corruption as quickly as they're doing. Now, impeachment's next, right? We'll see what happens there. So every once in a while, we get documents under FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act, directly or through lawsuits trying to enforce FOIA, and you look at them and you think, oh, these are really important, and we've got to get them out quickly. Well, that just happened last week. We had gotten documents from the National Institutes of Health confirming, in my view, U.S. support for the very type of research in Wuhan that would have created COVID, if indeed it was leaked from a lab. And here are the documents. Let me get them for you. There's a lot. 552 pages of records. And our investigators combed through them, and they're astonishing because they provide the smoking gun information showing that the United States government, specifically the Fauci agency, the National Institutes for Health, knowingly funded gain-of-function research into what they called mutants, virus mutants that are better able to, quote, predict the capacity of coronaviruses to infect people. So it's proof positive, in addition to the other documents Judicial Watch has uncovered, that gain-of-function was a priority. It wasn't just incidental and accidental, but a priority for the Fauci gang, NIH, for years at the Wuhan Institute through the infamous EcoHealth organization. And I'm going to go through it here. This is a result of a FOIA, so we didn't have to sue, but you can bet we only got these documents because we did sue in other circumstances for similar documents. So they know what Judicial Watch is going to do. And even as it is, we asked for these documents in December of 2021, and they waited a year to give them to us. Well over a year. EcoHealth planned to sequence the spike protein from coronavirus obtained from bats for the purpose of, quote, creating mutants to identify how significantly each would need to evolve to use ACE2, ACE2, which I think a technical name for a receptor to gain entry into the human cells. That's the proof. That's gain of function. I mean, I never thought to call gain of function manufactured viruses as mutants. Well, that's what they were calling it in government documents. It's not like I'm making this up. As I said, we asked for these records back in December 2021, and we specifically asked for all records submitted by the EcoHealth Alliance to NIH or its sub-agencies related to the grant number, and we list the grant number, titled Understanding the Risk of Bat Coronavirus Emergence during the term of the grant. So we already knew this grant described and involved gain-of-function research from other documents. But these other documents that have just now come out erase any doubt or pretend excuses they had that this wasn't gain-of-function. I think our friend Dr. Robert Malone, who many of you know as someone who's been blowing the whistle on the misconduct by Fauci and company and the mRNA vaccines, as someone who helped create the mRNA technology, he's one of the world's experts on it. He said, after looking at these documents, the worst atrocity in the history of the world has been confirmed. And it was all thanks to these documents that we uncovered through this Judicial Watch FOIA. In the initial application for federal assistance submitted on June 5th, 2013, so this goes back 10 years, by EcoHealth Alliance. The section is titled Specific Aims. Now, just to be clear, EcoHealth Alliance was the vehicle, the pass-through organization for funding of the Wuhan Institute and other Chinese institutions involved in this gain-of-function and other types of dangerous research. There's a section in the application called Specific Aims, which notes the intention to create mutant bat viruses and, quote, predict the capacity of, as I said, the coronaviruses to infect people. To understand the risk, and this is the quote, of zoonotic COVID, coronavirus, COV is the language they use, coronavirus emergence, we propose to examine, 1, the transmission dynamics of bat coronaviruses across the human-wildlife interface, and 2, how this process is affected by coronavirus evolutionary potential and how it might force coronavirus evolution. We will assess the nature and frequency of contact among animals and people in 2 critical human-animal interfaces, live animal markets in China, isn't that interesting, and people who are highly exposed to bats in rural China. So is that why they were so quick to blame the wet market? They kind of already knew this was potentially an issue in terms of transmission, so they had a go-to excuse, right? That's how I read this. And this is the key part of this document. At least there's a lot of interesting material here, and I encourage you to read all of these documents. Specific Aim 3, and this is the paragraph title, discusses testing predictions of coronavirus interspecies transmission. This is the big paragraph. We will test our models of host range, i.e. emergence potential, experimentally using reverse genetics, pseudovirus and receptor binding assays, and virus infection experiments in cell culture and humanized mice. With bat coronaviruses that we've isolated or sequenced, and using live virus or pseudovirus infection in cells of different origin or expressing different receptor molecules, we will assess potential for each isolated virus and those with receptor binding site sequences to spill over. We will do this by sequencing the spike or other receptor binding fusion protein genes from all of our bat coronaviruses, creating mutants to identify how significantly each would need to evolve to use ACE2, CD26, DPP4, which is also a MERS coronavirus receptor, or other potential coronavirus receptors. So they're also messing with MERS, which is a pretty dangerous disease as well. So this is gain of function, and they talk about it as mutants. Devastating. In the continuing discussion of the aims of the research, the report states, and this is the section heading, in vitro cell lines and humanized mouse model. We have developed primary cell lines and transformed cell lines from 9 bat species using kidney, spleen, heart, brain, and intestine. We have used these for virus isolation, infection assays, and receptor molecule gene cloning. We also have a large number of cell lines from humans and animals that we will use for virus infectivity assays. We obtained a letter of support from Dr. Ralph Barrick, one of the key folks involved in gain of function, who was keen to collaborate with us initially to infect his humanized mouse model with our bat SARS-like coronavirus that uses ACE2 and subsequently to use other coronaviruses that we identify. The results will provide information whether bat coronaviruses could use known bat and human ACE or other known COVID or coronavirus receptors to enter cells and allow us to determine critical receptor binding sites, viral host range, and to better predict the capacity of our coronaviruses to infect people. Gain of function to infect people. They're trying to figure out how their mutant viruses that they're creating might infect people. And that's the bare purpose of the research. Now they say that's an awesome purpose, and those of us who are critics say that's a very dangerous purpose in the sense if it gets out, you don't know what's going to happen. So they had a grant of $3.3 million, EcoHealth, to fund a project, as we described it, understanding the risk of coronavirus emergence. And it was originally supposed to run from the 2013 to 2018. The first project performance site location was to be in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. 3 other Chinese sites follow: East China Normal University in Shanghai, Yunnan Institute of Endemic Disease Control and Prevention in Dali, and the Center for Disease Control and Prevention in Guangdong in Guangzhou. So there are at least 3 sites in China beyond Wuhan. And the reason I'm going into this detail, A, because no one else will tell you about it. B, it's the most historically significant information that we found on this issue. And C, we got to stop it because I'm worried it's still happening. On May 27, 2014, the NIH infamously awarded EcoHealth $3 million over 5 years for this coronavirus research. The grant application received by NIH in June of 2013 includes a list of senior personnel that includes the bat lady in China, Shi Zhengali, and Zhang Zhongji of the Wuhan Institute of Virology, Peter Daszak, CEO of EcoHealth Alliance, and other Chinese scientists, including Ke Zhengwan, I don't know Chinese, so I'm kind of guessing my way through some of these pronunciations, of the Chinese CDC and Prevention of Guangdong Province. A section of the application describes some of the work to be conducted by the EcoHealth scientists in China. A research scientist will be hired at 12 months time per year to provide direct assistance and oversight of field activities in China, maintain equipment and logistics, and coordinate animal and human sample shipment to the labs in China and the US. So this gain of function wasn't just in China, folks, it was here at home. Once we secured institutional review boards for human sampling in year 1, we will hire 3 medical officers from China provincial CDCs, which is their equivalent of Centers for Disease Control, as consultants to work in Guangxi, Hunan, and Fujian during year 2 and during year 2 through year 5. These medical officers will be responsible for the human sampling as well as maintaining cold chain for storage and shipping samples. Dr. Zhengli Ji, the senior virologist, that's the bat lady, I guess they talk about how much she gets paid per year, but that's redacted, will oversee the coronavirus screening for all samples collected in China. So she was running the show. She will work with the principal investigator, co-investigators, and senior key personnel to analyze data and write manuscripts. She will also coordinate data and material sharing with the co-investigators. So there's no plausible deniability about any of this that Fauci or his people had about what was going on in China. They were telling them outright, we're working with the Chinese government to create mutant viruses. Here's who we're paying, here's who we're hiring, here's where it's going on in the United States, here are the key people involved, and this is exactly what we're doing. They describe the creation of mutant viruses, gain of function research, and what their goal was. These documents, time and time again, confirm that in dramatic ways. RNA extractions, these are other things that they're involved in. We will be running RNA extractions for 1,000 bats per year. 3 sample per bat, oral, anal, and blood in each year. Extracted RNA per animal will be pooled. DNA sequencing. In each year of the project, DNA sequencing will be performed on 3,200 samples at a cost of $291 per reaction. Laboratory supplies. We request support for in vitro infection experiments using pseudoviruses carrying the spike proteins, wild type or mutants, gain of function, or live viruses and cell lines of different origins, binding affinity assays between spike proteins, wild types or mutants, and different cellular receptor molecules in humanized mouse experiments. This is just unbelievable. So you got to find, you got to see, you look at these documents, you got to go deeper and deeper to see time and time again, they talk about gain of function. So this wasn't like, well, they began and then they stopped doing gain of function. They were reporting the gain of function type research. And Judicial Watch previously has uncovered that they were nervous about the gain of function research in 2016, which times up with this report in year 3. The annual report submitted for year 3 of the grant project from the period June of 2017 to May of 2018 notes in year 3, so they're describing a gain of function. We successfully isolated RS4874 from the single bat fecal sample. Using the reverse genetic system we previously developed, we constructed 2 chimeric viruses with the W1V1 backbone replaced with the S spike protein gene of RS7327 and RS4231 respectively. So this is, I could read it in detail that neither you or I will understand. This is gain of function. And then there's this other document, this is I guess related to the year 4 report. They confirm experimentation done in a whole organism, infection of SARS coronavirus with variants of spike protein. The report includes information about the construction of viruses of varying pathogenicity and testing them on humanized mice. Don't get me started about the Frankenstein humanized mice they're using. I mean, that's a whole other ball of wax. Using the reverse genetic methods we previously developed, infectious clones with the W1V1, the SARS-like coronavirus backbone and spike protein, were constructed, and recombinant viruses were successfully rescued. In year 4, we performed preliminary in vivo infection on transgenic mice that express this ACE2 receptor. Mice were infected with the recombinant virus and the 3 chimeric viruses with different spikes. This is just confirmation they're doing the gain of function. So I could read all 552 pages, but I won't. But you can see I've given you proof positive information as confirmed by NIH, NIAID, etc., that they were funding mutant viruses, the creation of mutant viruses, the very definition of gain of function research. And what was the result? I think it was COVID-19. Now, do I know that for a fact? Of course I don't. But it stands to reason, don't you agree? Let's be straightforward on this. A review of these and other documents suggests that the U.S. funding for China and elsewhere for mutant virus gain of function research may have been responsible for the emergence of the COVID pandemic in Wuhan. This gain of function scandal should be the subject of criminal investigations. Because I tell you, if you're lying to Congress about your involvement in gain of function, as it looks like Fauci was doing, if you're pretending that you're not funding gain of function, and you are, and money is being spent when it's not supposed to be on gain of function under your own rules, that's fraud. It's potential perjury and who knows what else, given if this indeed happened, millions of people died. Because it certainly helps explain why the Fauci gang didn't want the lab leak theory out there. Because if it was a lab leak and the virus that was leaked out was human engineered, it was only engineered thanks to U.S. taxpayer money and direct funding of that research. So whenever they were nervous about the lab leak, in my view, they were nervous because if the lab leak happened, as has been suggested, they were responsible for COVID. Fauci and company, EcoHealth Alliance. They were engaged in this research to create mutant viruses, and how can you not presume a mutant virus was COVID-19, ultimately? So fact check that. We've got the documents. And they're still trying to sell us, oh, it came from a wet market. And, you know, well, read this and you figure out whether you're persuaded one way or the other. So I said it's still an open question. Because our partners in China were disappearing people, threatening people, withholding data. So we don't have all the information that we can use to ultimately figure it out, at least at this time. Of course, that's also evidence that it was a lab leak, because if it was perfectly innocent, they'd be providing the information, right? And of course, they were suppressing it here in the United States as well, which is also credible information or evidence that it was a lab leak because of the cover-up. That's the inference you can draw. And we funded it. We funded this mess. And I tell you, I know it. Based on other documents we've reviewed, Judicial Watch is second to none in exposing what's going on with COVID and the vaccines, etc. Nationally, there are fewer people better able to analyze these documents, understand where they are in terms of the universe of the scandal, and know where to look to get more documents. We are the go-to group when it comes to figuring out the truth about COVID, how it emerged, the abuses and government misconduct associated with the vaccines, and the other threats we face because of this type of gain-of-function research and other dangerous biological research that is going on under our noses with the approval of the government. Now, the only question is Congress going to are we going to stop funding gain-of-function research in the least? Is there going to be a criminal investigation? What's going to happen? And the fact that you probably won't hear about this anywhere but here tells you all you need to know about the complicity and the corruption and the dangerous bias of the big media. Because this is deadly work we're talking about here, right? Because if I'm right, people are dead. And there's enough here to think that or to suggest that I am right. And if the media isn't interested in it, we're all at risk. If the government isn't interested in it and is actually still funding it, we're all at risk. Same goes for Congress, etc. So this is a deadly scandal. It's not just your everyday scandal of government corruption and abuse. This gets people killed in rather direct ways, potentially. So more is coming. We've got more documents I know we have to release, and more coming every day virtually at Judicial Watch. Thank God for Judicial Watch. That's all I can say. So we have this unprecedented investigation of Donald Trump and other Americans by a special counsel that Garland appointed to target Trump, not to target Biden. I guess there's a special counsel targeting Biden over the silly document issue, but not about the substantive corruption involved with the family. But Jack Smith is investigating this document issue and the January 6 issues, and essentially the President Trump's rights and the rights of other American citizens to dispute the 2020 election. Just inherently abusive use of the grand jury process and the Justice Department. And, many reasons people don't trust this Justice Department to investigate issues like this, especially politicized issues like this, is because the Justice Department is politicized. It's politicized because it's run by politicians, which is always part of the problem. But that's what you have when you have representative government, right? But it's also because the civil service and the supposed career civil servants and the folks who are supposed to be nonpartisan and neutral are also politicized. And we found out quite directly, those of us who've been watching government for a long time know this has been the case, that these investigations are run by partisan left-wing Democrats, especially the ones targeting Trump and company. The Justice Department is just full of Democrats. And it's not a criticism, it's a reality. I mean, it's a big Democratic operation. Now, do they do their jobs diligently and without political bias on certain issues? Of course they do. I mean, there are a bunch of competent lawyers out there that just are doing their work. But when political issues come up, we should be quite suspicious of what's going on. And that's true with the targeting of Trump for sure. We saw that during his presidency, and the abuse by the Justice Department and the FBI for political purposes hasn't stopped in terms of the targeting. And one way of getting accountability from the Justice Department is figuring out who's working on these investigations. Now, under Special Counsel Mueller, Judicial Watch did this type of investigation and uncovered that there were a lot of longtime Democrat operatives or those with a Democratic bias or leaning working on the Mueller operation. I think there was only one former Republican and everyone who was working for Mueller. And so it was pretty easy to figure out who the people were because we were able to get the documents from the Justice Department. Now, we've asked for similar documents for the operation of Special Counsel Jack Smith. We said we want all staff rosters, phone lists, or similar records depicting all employees hired by or detailed to the office of Special Counsel Jack Smith. Simple FOIA request that usually gets a simple answer. Here's the document. Sometimes you get material withheld because, you know, they're not going to give out people's email addresses easily or their phone numbers and such. We understand that. But they told us we can't have anything. We can't find out anyone, the names of anyone working on this unprecedented investigation, grand jury operation targeting former President Trump. Exemption 6, this is the reasons they're telling us. They said they're being withheld pursuant to Exemption 6 and 7A of FOIA. Exemption 6 pertains to information, the release of which would constitute a clearly unwarranted invasion of personal privacy. I'm not asking for the name of the secretary. I want to know who are the FBI agents, who are the lawyers. They don't have a right to personal privacy. They're government workers involved in a high-level criminal investigation. Previously, we've gotten the names of these folks. Why not now? You know why not now? Because the last time we got the names of folks, the Mueller operation had a lot of PR problems because they had a bunch of political people working on the case. Remember Peter Strzok, the FBI agent who was secretly fired because he was sending out politically outrageous text messages attacking Trump and company? They don't want that happening again. You bet they have the same crowd working on this type of investigation. Exemption 7A pertains to records or information compiled for law enforcement purposes, the release of which reasonably could be expected to interfere with enforcement proceedings. What does that mean? We're not asking for secrets about their investigation. And of course, if there are names involved that are working for them in either a confidential way or as a source, which arguably might be covered by Exemption 7A, they can withhold it. But the idea that we get nothing, we can't find out the name of no one other than the name of Jack Smith working on this investigation, it's absurd. As I said, previous Judicial Watch and other investigations of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigative team highlighted anti-Trump bias and partisan hiring. FBI official Peter Strzok was secretly removed from Mueller's team after anti-Trump and political text messages were uncovered. And as I write in the press release, one can only conclude after seeing the uproar over the anti-Trump partisan Mueller operation that the Garland Justice Department has something to hide about Jack Smith and his prosecutors, again targeting Trump and other Republicans with unprecedented investigations. Special Prosecutor Jack Smith isn't above the law, and the American people have a right to basic accountability and transparency. And now through FOIA, Judicial Watch has, as I said, uncovered many documents related to Mueller's team, his top deputy Andrew Weissman, literally who he was interviewing. And now we can't get anything about people working for Smith? Unbelievable. So it looks like we're going to have to sue. It looks like, I hope, Jim Jordan and company get on this and start getting the names as well. But, you know, we're not going to go away. You know, the media and the deep state and the establishment and the corrupt parties, operatives running these investigations, they think they can scare people like Judicial Watch off with intimidation, threats, etc. And we're not going to back off. And we're going to continue to do the heavy lifting on behalf of you, the American people, because someone needs to watch the watchers. And someone needs to hold those who are supposed to be upholding the rule of law accountable to the rule of law. So if you haven't already, I encourage you to support Judicial Watch. You can see from our Wuhan documents about the mutant viruses, the work we're doing to hold accountable the Justice Department over its wild abuses of power, how important our work is. If you're not already supporting Judicial Watch, I encourage you to do so. You can support us at judicialwatch.org as always, and we're all over the internet, so you can figure out how to contribute that way as well. And with that, I will join you here next time on the Judicial Watch Weekly Update, and I hope to see you then. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.